Nobody in that storage lot knew that the woman in the faded hoodie had slept in her car the night before, or that the crumpled envelope in her pocket held almost every dollar she had left in the world. They just saw another bidder standing in front of a red metal door with a number stenciled on it, squinting into the shadow of Unit 38. To them it was routine. Door rolls up, people glance inside, someone shrugs, someone bids. For her, this rusty rectangle of space felt like a cliff edge. If she stepped wrong, she and her 5-year-old daughter would fall straight through whatever thin floor was left under their lives. Her name was Kara, and there had been a time not so long ago when words like auction and storage unit meant nothing to her. She used to know simpler words: daycare pickup, grocery list, Friday movie night. There had been a small apartment with peeling paint and loud neighbors, but it was theirs. She had worked the late shift at a diner and a weekend cleaning job in a wealthy neighborhood where the lawns looked like magazine photos and the trash cans smelled of things she could not afford. It had been hard, but the numbers had added up. Rent paid. Shoes for her little girl, Lily. Enough left for a cheap cake on birthdays. Then life started subtracting faster than she could count. Lily got sick one winter. Nothing dramatic, just one of those stubborn infections that needed tests and visits and antibiotics that never seemed to be fully covered. The bills came in thin white envelopes that kept multiplying. Her ex stopped sending money, then stopped picking up the phone. The diner cut hours. The landlord raised the rent by just a small amount, an amount that pushed everything off balance. When the eviction notice arrived, printed in cold black letters, Kara folded it once, then again, as if making it smaller could somehow make it less true. She sold what she could and loaded the rest into the back of an aging SUV. Clothes, a few dishes, Lily's box of crayons, a worn stuffed rabbit. For a while they stayed with a friend on a lumpy pull-out couch. When that friend's boyfriend decided 2 extra bodies were too much, the car became home. They learned where the quiet parking lots were, which church handed out free showers on Thursdays, which gas station restrooms stayed clean longest. She told Lily they were on an adventure, and the little girl believed her because children at that age believe the tone more than the facts. The idea of a storage auction slipped into Kara's life through the back door of someone else's kitchen. She was wiping down marble counters in a big house up on the ridge, the kind with 3 empty guest rooms and a wine fridge larger than her old refrigerator. 2 women sat at the island, drinking coffee from cups thin enough to see light through. Their conversation drifted over the scent of citrus cleaner and expensive perfume. One of them was laughing about her brother, who had a weird new hobby of buying abandoned storage units, turning the contents into profit. He had once found a box of old toys that sold online for more than a month's salary. "You never know what people just walk away from," the woman said, tapping her manicured nail against the countertop. The line lodged in Kara's mind like a splinter that didn't hurt at first. That night, sitting in the driver's seat with Lily asleep in the back under a faded blanket, Kara scrolled through her phone on patchy free Wi-Fi from a fast food place. Videos of storage auctions played in jittery light on the cracked screen, doors rolling up, people gasping at hidden treasures, battered boxes hiding coins, jewelry, vintage signs. It all looked too easy, which made her suspicious. But under the suspicion something else stirred, something she had not allowed herself in months. The thought that maybe, just maybe, the world still held one good surprise with her name on it. She did the math in her head. There was the last bit of cash she kept in an envelope for emergencies, the tips from extra cleaning jobs, the gift card a church had given her, for groceries only, that the manager had quietly told her she could redeem for cash if she really needed to. It was not a lot, but it was more than nothing. When she found the notice in a local classified site, public lien sale, contents of delinquent storage units, Saturday, registration 9 a.m., she saved a screenshot and stared at it for a long time. Common sense lined up every argument against going. She had no truck, no storage space of her own, no experience. She had a child to care for and no cushion if things went badly. But the small, stubborn part of her that refused to give up kept whispering that nothing was going well anyway. If she did nothing, the end of this story was already written. If she took a risk, at least the ending might change. The morning of the auction, she parked the SUV at the edge of the lot where the storage buildings stood in long rows, their red doors framed by beige metal columns. The sky was a flat pale gray, the kind of color that made everything look tired. Lily sat in the back seat with a coloring book someone had donated at a shelter, humming to herself. Kara adjusted the mirror so she could see her daughter's face. There was a smudge of marker near the little girl's mouth, and her hair needed brushing, but her eyes were bright. Kara told her she had to step away for a little while to look at something for work, and that she would lock the doors and stay where she could see the car. Lily nodded with the seriousness of a 5-year-old accepting an important job and went back to her drawing. Inside the chain-link fence, a small crowd was gathering, men in baseball caps and cargo shorts, a woman with a clipboard and a sharp, assessing gaze, a younger guy in a hoodie filming everything with his phone. They looked like they belonged here, part of a routine they understood. Kara felt the old familiar heat rise in her cheeks, the feeling of being the one who doesn't know the rules. She registered with the manager, signing her name on a clipboard with a pen attached by a chewed-up plastic cord, and slipped the numbered bidding card into her pocket behind the envelope of cash. The manager rattled off the rules in a practiced voice. No stepping inside the unit before bidding, cash payment only, 48 hours to clear any unit you won. His tone said he had said these words 100 times before. Her racing heart did not care how ordinary they were. The auction started at one end of the row and moved like a slow, uneven tide. Door up, people crowding forward, a few seconds of quick, hungry glances. The auctioneer's chant rolled over the asphalt, surprisingly musical. Most of the units were exactly what she had seen online. Mattresses with questionable stains, broken dressers, boxes sagging from moisture. They went cheap or not at all. She kept her hands at her sides, the bidding card a stiff rectangle against her thigh. She reminded herself that the first unit that looked not awful was not automatically meant for her. It was a strange thing, standing there almost broke, learning how to say no to small wrong chances while waiting for a slightly better one. Somewhere around the middle of the row, a unit opened that made heads tilt for a different reason. Behind the rising red door, there was no visible chaos, no collapsing furniture. The space was filled instead with boxes stacked in careful columns, each tied with twine. Someone had stretched a thin cotton sheet over a small piece of furniture at the back. A dresser, maybe, to keep the dust off. On the side of the nearest box, in small, neat handwriting, Kara could make out words: linen, formal, kitchen, glass, documents, personal. The labels made her chest tighten. This was not how hoarders packed. This was how people who expected to come back someday did it. And yet, the lock had been cut, the door rolled up, the contents about to be sold to strangers. One of the regulars muttered something dismissive about boring estate stuff, and a few of the others turned away, more interested in the next door that promised visible electronics or power tools. To them, neat boxes looked like work, not excitement. But to Kara the sight was different. Order meant that someone had loved these things enough to organize them. It also meant that whatever was here, it had probably been protected from the worst of heat and damp. That made it easier to sell. Easier to respect to. The auctioneer called for an opening bid, his voice bouncing off the metal. No one spoke. For a few long seconds, all Kara heard was the thud of her own pulse in her ears. The ceiling she had set for herself that morning. A hard number she would not cross if she wanted to keep gas in the tank and some food in the cooler, rose up in her mind like a sign. The silence stretched, and she lifted her card. Her bid came out smaller than her fear. The auctioneer repeated it, scanning the crowd. One of the men in the front glanced back at her, then shrugged and let it go. A second bid came from the woman with the clipboard, reflexive more than enthusiastic. They went back and forth in increments that felt enormous to Kara and trivial to everyone else. The clipboard woman dropped out first, attention already drifting toward the next unit. The hammer came down with a sharp, almost embarrassed tap. Just like that, Unit 38 belonged to a woman who had nowhere solid to put a single one of its boxes. She paid in cash at the office, her fingers stiff as she counted the notes out on the counter. The manager gave her a receipt and a cut key, reminding her again about the 48 hours. His eyes softened for a second when she mentioned she had only her SUV to move things, no helpers. He pointed at a row of battered dollies leaning against the wall and said she could borrow one as long as she brought it back. She thanked him and stepped outside, the key cool and heavy in her palm, as important as any she had ever held. Across the lot, through the fence, she could see the faded blue roof of her SUV and the small shape of Lily in the back seat, drawing circles on fogged glass with her fingertip. Kara slid the key into the lock of Unit 38 and paused before turning it. Up close, the smell that drifted from the thin line under the door was nothing unpleasant, just dust, cardboard, a faint sweetness of old paper. It reminded her of school libraries and her grandmother's linen closet. She took a breath that felt too large for her chest and rolled the door up. Metal screeched briefly, then settled. Light from the bright, colorless sky spilled in, pushing back the dimness one reluctant step at a time. The boxes stood where she had first seen them, lined up like a small, patient city. The cotton sheet at the back hid whatever piece of furniture sat beneath it. To the right of the stacked columns, near the wall, she noticed something she had not seen from the hallway. A low, square shape made from rough chipboard panels screwed together, like a crate built by someone handy with tools and secrets. It had no labels, no twine, no indication at all of what might be inside. For a moment Kara just stood there on the threshold, hands hanging loosely at her sides, fighting the urge to laugh and cry at the same time. Behind her, the lot hummed with distant voices and the dull thump of other doors opening and closing, other people chasing their own versions of salvation. Here, in this 10 by 15 box of shadow and possibility, a woman who had slept in her car was about to find out whether she had just wasted the last of her money on someone else's leftovers, or open the first door that might lead her and her daughter out of the slow, grinding fall they had been in for far too long. She took one step inside, then another, the concrete cool under her shoes, eyes fixed on that unmarked crate in the corner, feeling in her bones that whatever story Unit 38 wanted to tell would start right there. The next morning began the way most of Kara's mornings did, with the slow ache of uncertainty before the day had even decided what it wanted to be. She woke before sunrise, her body stiff from the car seat, her neck resting on the edge of a folded sweatshirt. The parking lot behind the grocery store was quiet, except for the soft hum of delivery trucks in the distance. Lily was still asleep, small and curled under a blanket that smelled faintly of strawberries from a spilled drink days ago. Kara watched her daughter's chest rise and fall, that steady rhythm the only part of her life that still felt unbreakable. She reached for the travel mug beside her, took a sip of lukewarm coffee, and told herself the same thing she had told herself for weeks. One more day, just do the next thing right. By 8 o'clock, they were parked outside the storage facility again. The sky had cleared overnight, leaving the air crisp and bright. Kara brushed her hair back into a ponytail, changed Lily into clean clothes, and walked her into the small office by the front gate. The manager, an older man with kind eyes, gave her a nod of recognition and handed over the key she had left the day before. 48 hours start ticking the moment that door opens, he said, his tone gentle but firm. She thanked him and promised to be careful. Lily tugged at her sleeve and asked if they were moving into the new house. Kara smiled, not correcting her. In a way, it wasn't so far from the truth. For now, the storage unit was the only space that belonged to them. Inside the lot, morning sunlight fell in narrow stripes between the buildings, turning the red doors into panels of glowing color. Unit 38 waited quietly at the end of the row. The metal handle felt cold under her hand. As she rolled the door up, the same smell of dry wood and paper drifted out, a clean, faintly sweet scent that reminded her of rooms that used to mean safety. She stepped in carefully, Lily following, clutching her stuffed rabbit. The site hadn't changed, boxes lined neatly in columns, twine crisscrossing their tops, and that crate in the corner, dull and unmarked. For a long minute, Kara just looked around, trying to decide where to start. She felt small, not because of fear, but because the space seemed full of someone else's history, the kind of order that only existed in the lives of people who had known security. She decided to start with the labeled boxes, small steps before courage. Using a utility knife she'd borrowed from the manager, she cut the first length of twine and lifted the flaps of a box marked kitchen glass. Inside, everything was carefully wrapped in yellowed newspaper. The date on one page read 1986. She unwrapped a glass, then another, thick green tumblers with tiny air bubbles in the surface, each one heavy and perfect. They caught the morning light in soft ripples. Lily held one up, smiling at the way it bent the sunlight onto her hand. Kara laughed quietly. It was the first sound of real happiness she had heard from her daughter in weeks. There were bowls, too, and small plates with faded floral edges. She placed them back gently. They might not be valuable, but they were beautiful, and for now, that felt like enough. The next box was marked Documents, Personal. Kara hesitated before opening it. Paper always carried risk, bills, debts, things that could remind you of what was lost. But the curiosity that had brought her here didn't let her stop. Inside were folders, envelopes, and stacks of letters tied with a thin ribbon. The handwriting was elegant, practiced, the kind people learned before typing took over. She picked one at random, sliding the paper out just far enough to see the first line. My dearest Evelyn, the days here grow long without your voice. Kara stopped reading. It felt wrong to pry any further, like stepping into a private room uninvited. She tied the ribbon back, hands trembling a little, and set the letters aside. Whoever Evelyn was, someone had loved her enough to keep her words safe for decades. Lily had moved closer to the crate in the corner, tapping it lightly with her hand. The sound was hollow, a low echo like a drum. Kara joined her and ran her fingers along the edge. The crate wasn't made from regular boards but from chipboard panels, the kind used for shipping heavy things. It was screwed shut, the seams sealed with wide strips of old tape. There were no markings, no writing, nothing to suggest what might be inside. She tried to lift one side, but it barely shifted. Whatever was inside, it had weight. For a moment she thought about leaving it closed. Curiosity was one thing, dealing with whatever truth hid inside was another. But then Lily said softly, maybe it's toys, and Kara's heart twisted at the innocence in her voice. For her daughter, everything unknown was still possibly good. She found a small screwdriver in a box labeled Tools, Miscellaneous, and started working on the screws one by one. The chipboard splintered slightly as she pried the top loose. The air that escaped from inside was dry, old, carrying a faint metallic tang. She peeled back one panel, then another, and froze. Inside the crate were several smaller containers, plastic tubs stacked tightly together, their lids sealed with tape. One of them had cracked slightly, revealing the dull edge of something metallic inside. It wasn't junk. It wasn't empty. Her pulse quickened as she lifted one tub out and set it on the floor. The plastic was cloudy, the tape yellowed with age. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the edge, then tore the tape free. Inside, under a layer of thin cloth, were coins. Dozens of them. Maybe more. They weren't shiny. They had the soft gray glow of old silver, tarnished but dignified. Kara picked one up, brushing away the dust with her thumb. It was heavier than she expected. On one side, the faint outline of a crowned shield. On the other, the profile of a man's face, the edges milled in neat ridges. The date was almost invisible, but when she tilted it toward the light, she saw it, 1789. She felt dizzy for a moment, the number too big to belong in her hands. She glanced at Lily, who was watching her wide-eyed, and for the first time since she'd rolled up that red door, Kara let herself whisper the word she hadn't dared to think. Treasure. She didn't whoop or scream or let hope rush ahead. Age and exhaustion had taught her the danger of counting blessings before they settled. But her fingers trembled as she lifted another coin, then another. They were all old. Spanish, maybe. Colonial era, she thought, remembering a documentary she'd once half-watched in a hospital waiting room. Beneath the coins lay a small envelope of folded paper. The texture was thick, almost like parchment, browned at the edges. She opened it carefully, afraid the folds might crumble. Inside was a rough hand-drawn map, ink faded to a soft brown, lines tracing what looked like a river bend, a few hills, a cross marked off-center. Tiny notations followed the curves in precise, old-fashioned handwriting. She didn't understand any of it, but she knew immediately that this wasn't just someone's doodle. Lily leaned closer, her voice quiet. Is it a pirate map? Kara smiled faintly. Maybe, she said, though part of her knew it wasn't make-believe. Whatever this was, it was real and valuable in ways she didn't yet understand. For a long time, she sat there, cross-legged on the concrete floor, the coins spread out on a folded towel, the map open beside them. The sunlight shifted, moving across the floor in slow, silent steps. She felt something stir in her chest, something she had nearly forgotten existed. Possibility. Not fantasy or greed, just the sense that life might still hold choices instead of endings. Around her, the quiet hum of the storage lot felt almost sacred, like the world had paused to give her a moment to breathe. By the time the afternoon shadows lengthened, she had repacked the coins and wrapped the map in a soft cloth. She didn't know what to do next. Selling them blindly felt dangerous. Keeping them without understanding their value felt foolish. Somewhere between fear and wonder, she made herself a promise: to be careful, to be patient, to do the next right thing. Outside, she locked the red door and looked once more at the row of units stretching into the distance. People came here to store the past. She had come here, somehow, to open her future. If you've ever believed that luck sometimes waits quietly in forgotten places, don't forget to like this story and subscribe. Maybe the next dusty door you open will have a story of its own. That night, the map would not let her sleep. Every time Kara closed her eyes, she saw the faint brown lines bending like veins through the parchment, the tiny cross that seemed to pulse with meaning. She lay in the driver's seat of the SUV, parked at the edge of a quiet rest stop, listening to Lily's soft breathing in the back. The coins were locked in a small metal toolbox under the seat, wrapped in an old towel. The map rested beside them in an envelope. She kept checking to make sure it was still there, as though the air might steal it if she let her guard down. It was absurd, she knew. But when everything you owned fit in a vehicle, one sheet of paper could feel like the thin line between desperation and hope. By morning, her mind was clear enough to think practically. She needed to know what the coins were worth, and if they were even real. The problem was how to do that without looking like someone who had stumbled into luck she didn't deserve. Pawn shops could be dangerous. She'd heard enough stories about people tricked into giving away valuable things for pennies. Libraries and museums felt safer, but also intimidating, like places where you needed credentials she didn't have. Still, she had to start somewhere. After dropping Lily off at a local church daycare that offered free hours to families in need, she drove into town and parked outside a narrow storefront wedged between a barber and a thrift shop. The sign in the window read, "Prescott Coin and Collectibles, Appraisals, Fair Offers, Honest Advice." It didn't look flashy, and maybe that was a good thing. Inside, the air smelled faintly of metal and old paper. The counters were lined with glass cases filled with rows of coins, medals, and tiny white labels with neat handwriting. Behind the counter stood a man in his late 50s, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of posture that came from years of bending over display trays. He greeted her politely but without warmth, the way professionals do when they're not yet sure if your time will be worth theirs. Kara opened the small tin box and placed 3 coins on the pad he slid toward her. They looked dull against the bright glass. The man picked one up with a pair of tweezers, studied it under a small magnifying lens, and hummed softly. "These are Spanish reals," he said finally, his tone halfway between interest and caution. "Late 1700s, maybe colonial era. Conditions not bad. Silver contents high. Where'd you find them?" Kara hesitated. "They were left behind in a storage unit I bought," she said, keeping her voice as steady as she could. He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the coin. "Happens sometimes," he murmured. "People store family things, then disappear. You'd be surprised what ends up lost." He set the coin down and tapped his pen against the counter. "If they're genuine, you might have something decent. Maybe a few hundred per piece, maybe more if there's provenance. I'd have to send one for verification. It's a $100 test." The number hit her like a wall. $100 just to test one coin. She thanked him and said she'd think about it. He handed her a card and, as she turned to leave, added, "Be careful who you show these to. History makes people strange." Back in the car, she stared at the business card until the print blurred. "Be careful who you show these to." It sounded more like a warning than advice. She tucked it away and started the engine. Her next stop wasn't planned, it was instinct. The county library sat on a quiet corner near the park, an old brick building that smelled of dust and sunlight. Inside, a gray-haired librarian looked up from her desk as Kara approached. "I was wondering," Kara began, "if you have anything on Spanish coins or colonial trade routes. Old ones, maybe from the late 1700s. The woman smiled faintly, as if pleased by the question. "We might," she said. "Follow me." She led Kara down to the basement archives, where the air grew cooler and the hum of the fluorescent lights filled the silence. Rows of filing cabinets and binders stretched out like a paper labyrinth. The librarian pulled a few folders labeled historical collections, coinage, and trade routes. "Most of these were donated decades ago," she said, handing Kara a folder thick with notes. "There was a local historian, Benjamin Harlan. He studied early trade through this area, Spanish shipments, mule routes, that sort of thing." Kara froze at the name. Harlan. The words sounded familiar, though she couldn't place why. "He left behind maps and notes," the librarian continued, "but some went missing after his death. It's all a bit of a mystery." Kara opened the folder and stared at the old photocopies, sketches of rivers, hills, and valleys that looked eerily like the map she'd found. Her pulse quickened. One note mentioned Wilson Pass, site of rumored mule shipments carrying silver coinage from Baja routes. She read the line 3 times, her eyes tracing the faded ink. It was too close to be coincidence. Wilson Pass. The name didn't mean anything to her yet, but she could feel its weight. For the next hour, she sat at a small table under the hum of the lights, comparing the folds and bends of her own map with the reproductions in the folder. The handwriting looked similar, looping, patient strokes. Could her map have belonged to this historian? And if so, what had he been mapping before his notes disappeared? The thought sent a chill down her spine, half wonder, half fear. The librarian came by with a polite reminder that the archives closed in 10 minutes. Kara thanked her, copied a few pages, and slipped them into her tote. As she walked up the stairs into the bright daylight, she felt both smaller and more alive than she had in years. At the daycare, Lily ran into her arms, holding up a picture she'd drawn. A big red door and a stick figure of a woman smiling beside it. "That's our new house," Lily said proudly. Kara kissed her forehead and didn't correct her. Sometimes hope worked better when it wore the shape of imagination. On the drive back, the road shimmered with heat, but Kara barely noticed. Her thoughts spun around the map, the coins, and the strange echo of that name, Benjamin Harlan. Maybe the storage unit hadn't been random at all. Maybe she had opened a door someone else had been trying to find for decades. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Kara spread everything out on the SUV's dashboard. The coins, the photocopies, the fragile map. She traced the ink lines with her fingertip, following the river's curve to the small hand-drawn cross. Beneath her hand, time seemed to fold. The air inside the car felt charged, like the space between lightning and thunder. For the first time, she didn't feel like a person running from the past. She felt like someone moving toward something that might change everything. If stories where ordinary people stumble upon forgotten pieces of history give you that same quiet spark of curiosity, take a second to like this story and subscribe. What happened next would prove that some treasures aren't buried in the ground, they're hidden in the choices you're brave enough to make. By dawn, Kara had already made up her mind. She couldn't just sit and wonder anymore. The night had been long and restless, her thoughts looping between the coins, the map, and that name, Benjamin Harlan. She had read enough now to know that he was real, a historian who had spent years chasing stories about lost colonial shipments through this region. But it was the detail about his missing field maps that wouldn't leave her alone. What if the parchment she found wasn't just old, but his? And if that was true, what else could be waiting beyond the lines of that crude, hand-drawn cross? When Lily woke up, the little girl rubbed her eyes and smiled sleepily. "Are we going back to our treasure place today, Mommy?" Kara brushed a curl from her daughter's forehead and smiled. "Maybe for a little while," she said softly. "We have to be careful, though. Grown-up careful." Lily nodded solemnly, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Careful like when we cross the street?" "Exactly," Kara whispered. "Careful like that." The drive back to the storage facility felt different this time. The morning sun was still low, the light golden and sharp, but the air carried a strange sense of urgency. She parked near Unit 38 and glanced around. The lot was almost empty, except for a pickup truck near the far corner and a man she hadn't seen before, standing by the vending machine, pretending to read his phone. He didn't look up, but something about the way his shoulders angled made her uneasy. She turned away, unlocked the red door, and pushed it open. Inside, the air was cool and still. The boxes waited just as she'd left them, the crate open, the towel-wrapped coins stacked neatly inside. But as she knelt to check them, she noticed something small that made her breath catch. One of the tubs had been shifted slightly to the left. It wasn't much, just an inch, maybe two. But she remembered exactly how she'd placed them yesterday. Her first thought was that she was mistaken. Her second thought came colder. Someone had been here. She quickly checked the latch. No signs of force. Maybe she'd forgotten to lock it properly. Maybe the manager had come by for an inspection. She tried to calm herself, but her pulse wouldn't slow. Paranoia, she thought. You're just tired. Still, she decided to move the most valuable things into her car, just in case. One small box for the coins, the envelope for the map, and the photocopies she'd made at the library. It wasn't much, but it was everything that now mattered. By the time she finished, the man by the vending machine was gone. That afternoon, she called the library again and asked to speak with the same archivist, Ruth. When the woman's voice came on the line, warm and steady, Kara explained that she might have found one of Harlan's missing maps. There was a long pause, then Ruth said, "Can you come in tomorrow morning? I think you should speak with someone from the county historical office. They'd want to see it properly." Kara hesitated. Every instinct told her to stay invisible, that involving officials meant losing control. But hiding wasn't a real plan either. She agreed to come at 9. That night she barely slept. Instead, she spread the photocopies and the map out on the motel nightstand she'd rented for the night, tracing the same lines over and over until her fingers smudged faintly with dust. The cross on the map wasn't random. She was sure of it now. The drawn hills, the river bend, the tiny note, second rise north of Wash, all matched a section of land just outside town. She'd seen it once, a stretch of low desert hills near a dry creek bed called Cataract, Washington. The pieces were clicking together in ways that made her stomach twist with excitement and fear. If this was what Harlan had been chasing, had she stumbled onto something unfinished? Or something others had already looked for and never found? In the morning, the library's basement felt even quieter than before. Ruth was waiting with another person, a tall woman in a tan jacket who introduced herself as Dr. Ellen Pike from the State Museum. Her handshake was firm, her voice calm but sharp. "Ruth told me you might have something connected to Benjamin Harlan's work," she said. "May I see it?" Kara hesitated, then unwrapped the parchment. Under the fluorescent light, the faded ink seemed to come alive again. Dr. Pike leaned over, examining it with a small magnifier. "This is extraordinary," she murmured. "See this mark? That's Harlan's notation style. And here," she pointed at a faint signature barely visible under the cross. "Those are his initials. There's no question this was his." Kara felt her chest tighten. "So it's real?" "Oh, it's very real," Dr. Pike said softly. "And if I'm right, this could be the only surviving copy of his final expedition map." He was tracing the old colonial silver routes. They were believed to have ended near Cataract Wash, but he died before confirming it. His notes disappeared not long after. Kara's thoughts spun. "What would something like this be worth?" she asked carefully. Dr. Pike smiled faintly. "Historically? A great deal. Financially, that depends. But please be careful. You're not the first person to ask about Harlan's work, and not everyone who does has good intentions." The words settled like stones in her stomach. She thought again about the man near the vending machine, the slightly shifted box, the way her instincts had hummed with quiet alarm. "What do you mean?" she asked. Dr. Pike straightened, lowering her voice. "Harlan's estate was robbed decades ago. Some of his maps were sold privately before they were ever cataloged. People still search for them, collectors, dealers, sometimes worse. If anyone knows you have this, They might come looking. Kara swallowed hard. Then what should I do? For now, Dr. Pike said, document everything. Photographs, scans, your name on the record. Make copies. If you decide to sell or donate, do it through an institution, not a private buyer. She paused, then added, and don't tell anyone where you're keeping it. Kara nodded, heart pounding. On the drive back to the motel, she watched the world blur past. Fast food signs, gas stations, power lines slicing across the sky, and thought about how quickly her life had changed. Yesterday, she was just a mother trying to keep her child warm. Now she was the keeper of something people might kill to possess. That thought should have terrified her. But somewhere under the fear, another feeling grew, something fierce, protective, alive. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't just surviving. She was responsible for something bigger than herself. That night, as Lily slept peacefully on the motel bed, Kara sat by the window with the map in her lap, tracing the river's curve again. The second bend of the Wash. It wasn't far, a 40-minute drive, maybe less. She knew she shouldn't go. She knew she should wait, follow the advice, let the professionals handle it. But the pull was stronger than reason. Because deep down, she understood something simple: life didn't hand people like her second chances very often. And when it did, you had to be brave enough to follow the map before it vanished again. Kara waited until the sky began to fade from gold to gray before deciding. The motel room was silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and Lily's small, steady breathing. She stared at the folded map on the nightstand, the inked lines etched in her memory now as if they were her own. The words of Dr. Pike still echoed in her mind, don't tell anyone where you're keeping it. But there was a different kind of danger in doing nothing. She had lived her entire life obeying rules that never seemed to protect her. Maybe it was time to break one. Before dawn, she packed the map, a flashlight, and the small box of coins into a canvas bag. Lily stirred as she brushed a hand over her daughter's hair. I'll be back soon, sweetheart, she whispered. Just getting some air. She locked the door behind her and stepped into the cool desert morning. The air smelled of dust and rain that hadn't come yet, a kind of promise. She drove toward the hills, the headlights carving pale tunnels through the darkness. Every mile felt heavier, not with fear, but with the gravity of choice. By the time she reached Cataract Wash, the first light had started to break over the ridges. The landscape was empty, ancient in its stillness, scattered rocks, dry grass, and the winding cut of the riverbed like a scar across the earth. She parked near a broken fence, slung the bag over her shoulder, and walked toward the second bend marked on the map. The ground crunched beneath her shoes. The silence was total, except for the wind moving through the sage. She stopped where the earth rose slightly, the spot that matched the faded cross on the parchment. For a long moment, she stood there, trying to feel what Harlan must have felt when he'd drawn that mark: hope, frustration, maybe obsession. She crouched and brushed at the soil with her hand. It was dry and light, the color of ash. At first, there was nothing. Just dirt and roots and the occasional glint of quartz. But then, near the base of a half-buried stone, her fingertips caught the edge of something solid. She dug with both hands, her breath quickening. The earth gave way in clumps until a fragment of wood appeared, thin, splintered, the same chipboard texture as the crate from the storage unit. She froze, then kept going. Within minutes, she had uncovered the corner of a box no larger than a suitcase. It was old but intact, sealed with rusted hinges. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She sat back, staring at it, the rising sun turning its surface to gold. She hesitated before opening it, half afraid that whatever was inside could never live up to the weight of what she imagined. But curiosity, that quiet, stubborn engine that had carried her this far, refused to stop. She pried the lid open with a small crowbar she'd borrowed from the motel's maintenance shed. The hinges groaned, and a rush of dry air escaped. Inside lay several tightly wrapped bundles. The first was cloth, the second leather, both tied with twine so old it flaked when she touched it. She unwrapped one, and gasped. Inside were coins. Dozens of them, heavier than the ones from the storage unit, darker with age but unmistakably silver. Beneath them lay small bars stamped with faint symbols, almost erased by time. And at the very bottom, papers sealed in wax, brittle and yellow. She didn't understand the language, but one thing was clear: this wasn't fantasy. It was history. She sat back in the dust, her hands trembling, and laughed softly, not with joy, but with disbelief. After everything, the car, the nights sleeping cold, the worry about Lily, the universe had chosen her for this. For the first time in years, she felt not broken but necessary, like the story had been waiting for her to arrive and finish what someone else had started. The sound of tires crunching on gravel snapped her back. She turned sharply. A truck had stopped near the fence, dark, unmarked. A man stepped out, the same figure she'd seen by the vending machine days before. He didn't hurry, just adjusted his cap and started walking toward her. The way he moved told her everything. This wasn't coincidence. Someone had been watching. Kara's first instinct was to run, but she stopped herself. Running would make her look afraid, and fear was the one thing she couldn't afford. She quickly wrapped the bundles, slipped 2 small coins and 1 paper into her bag, and kicked sand over the rest of the box. By the time the man reached shouting distance, she was already walking back toward her car, her heart steady, her face calm. He nodded as she passed, pretending politeness. She nodded back, pretending not to know. When she reached the car, she locked the doors and sat perfectly still. The man lingered by the fence, scanning the ground, then turned and walked the opposite direction. She started the engine and drove away without looking back. That afternoon, Kara met Dr. Pike again, this time in the museum's side office. The room was quiet, the air cool. She laid the new coins and the document on the table. Dr. Pike didn't speak for several seconds. She just stared at the items as if afraid they might vanish. "You found it," she whispered. "Dear God, you really found it." The analysis took hours, filled with soft voices and careful hands. The verdict was clear: authentic late 18th century Spanish coinage, part of a missing colonial consignment. The document, once translated, confirmed trade passage rights, a discovery historians would call invaluable. For Kara, it was simpler. It meant money, safety, and the end of living in the shadows. Through a legal intermediary, the state offered a finder's settlement, not fortune, but a life restored. $87,000. Enough for an apartment, a future for Lily, and the rare peace of not worrying about gas money or food tomorrow. She accepted quietly. When the check came, she didn't cry. She just breathed. Months later, the museum opened a small exhibit, the Wilson Pass Discovery. Behind glass sat the coins, the letters, the map, her map, labeled, "Donated by K. Monroe and daughter." She visited with Lily on a Sunday morning. The little girl pressed her hands to the glass, eyes wide. "You found treasure," she whispered. Kara smiled. "No, honey," she said softly. "We found our way back." Outside, the sunlight poured over the parking lot, bright and ordinary. Kara stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of nothing in her pockets, no fear, no debt, no map left to chase. Just the quiet fullness of having survived. And if stories like this remind you that luck isn't magic but courage, that even the smallest chance can change everything, take a moment to like and subscribe. Somewhere out there, behind another locked red door, another forgotten life is waiting to be found.